Solve 15 over x minus 15 over x minus 2 equals negative 2. To solve this rational equation, I must bring the variables which are in the denominator up into the numerator. And the way to do that is, first of all, to find the least common denominator. This side's over 1. So x and x minus 2 are relatively prime because they're both prime and they don't have any factors in common. So my least common denominator would be x and x minus 2. So what I'm going to need to do then is multiply all three terms by x and x minus 2. So I'll give myself a little bit more room here. So I'll write it again. Okay, so I have that, and I like to write it over 1. So I'll multiply the first one by x and x minus 2, and it's really over 1. I'll multiply the second one by x and x minus 2, and it's really over 1. Because what I've done is I've multiplied the left-hand side by x and x minus 2 and then distributed it across the minus here, across the subtraction. And then now I also need to multiply the right-hand side by x and x minus 2. Again, I like to write it over 1 so that I can really see the levels of my fractions. So where this first fraction used to be right here, only the x cancels. And so I still have a 15, and I'll still have an x minus a 2. And I'll go ahead and distribute that in the next step. But let me just see what it's like when I clear out my fractions. And then this minus is still here. And then where this fraction used to be, the x minus 2 cancels, and I still have the 15 and the x. And if you look at this third one, nothing cancels. This is why I like to put the ones down here, so you can make sure that you see that everybody's on the top or in the numerator. So I have a negative 2x and still an x minus 2. So now in this next step, I need to simplify everything. So 15x, distributing it, minus 30 minus 15x equals, and distributing this side, I have a negative 2x squared and then a positive 4x. Alright, so now we see we have a polynomial. So I want all my terms on one side and 0 on the other. And since my leading term is negative, I'll go ahead and move it to this side by adding a 2x squared to both sides. So I'll start with that. So it becomes 2x squared. And then if you notice, 15x and negative 15x will cancel. So the only x's I have are here. So to move these to this side, I need to subtract 4x from both sides, leaving me with a minus 4x. So that removed both of these terms. Again, my negative 2x squared went here. These x's went away, so there weren't any x's on the left-hand side, but I subtracted 4x from both sides, so it's here. So that's why I have a 0. And then my last term I just bring down. It's a minus 30. Next step. Now that I have 0 on one side and my polynomial on the other, I need to look for a greatest common factor, which is 2. So I have x squared minus 2x minus 15. And then I need to keep factoring my trinomial. So x squared will be x times x. Factors of 15 that will get me to 2 would be 5 times 3. And to get a negative 2, I need a negative 5 and a positive 3. But looking at these three factors, notice the first factor doesn't have a variable. So I'm not really going to set it equal to 0 because 2 can't be 0. So I have these two possible solutions. I have x minus 5 equals 0, which gives me x is 5. And then I have x plus 3 equals 0, which gives me x is negative 3. So I'll go ahead and look back at my original problem. You must make sure in this case that x is not 0 and x cannot be a 2, because if it's either of these values, I would be dividing by 0, and it's not in either case. So my final solution then is 5 and negative 3, or I'll just write it right here, negative 3 and 5.